I'm Sarahi.
Hi, I'm Jaslyn, and welcome back to our second stat video.
Today we're going to show you guys 2 ways to find a chi-square distribution. Roll the clip.
So in this example, I'm going to show you how to find the chi-square distribution using the goodness to thick test. So in this example, we're going to see how the observed data significantly differs from the theoretical data. So for the chi-square distribution, we're going to create a chart, and the first thing to put into a chart is the observed numbers. In this case, the observed numbers will be 25, 30, 110, 15, 20. So I'm going to input these numbers. Afterwards, we're going to sum all these numbers, and we'll get the total of 200. For the second step, and continuing on into the chart, we're going to write down the expected value, and in order to find the expected value, we multiply the percent by the total. So in this case, for example, engineering students are 15%, so we're going to put 0.15 times 200 because that's the total. And we're going to continue doing this for each of the numbers. So we're going to put 0.20, 0.45, 0.10, 0.10, and we're going to multiply each of these numbers by 200. And we're going to get 30, 40, 90, 20, and 20, and this will be the expected values. For the third step, we're going to subtract the observed minus the expected. So we're going to subtract, for example, 20 minus 30, 35 minus 40, 110 minus 90, and so on. So these numbers will be 10, 5, 20, negative 5, and 0. And these numbers we got by subtracting observed minus expected. So for the fourth step, we're going to square these numbers. So the equation will look like this. And the square of these numbers are 100, 25, 400, 25, and 0. So for the fifth step in this chart, we're going to divide the square number with the expected. So for example, we're going to divide 100 with 30, 25 with 40, 490, and so on. And so these numbers will be 3.33, 0.625, 4.44, 1.25, and 0. And the last step after completing this chart is we're going to sum these numbers, and this will be your x squared, and this is 9.645. So after getting the x squared, we're going to find the degrees of freedom in order to find the critical value. And in order to find the degrees of freedom, this calculation is the n minus 1, and there's 5 numbers. So 5 minus 1 would be 4. So after we get the degrees of freedom, we're going to look at a chi-square chart in order to find the critical value. So this is a chi-square table. We got the degrees of freedom of 4, and we're going to assume the alpha level is 0.5. So we just follow along the lines, and the number will be 9.488. So that will be our critical value. So after looking at the chi-square table, we figured out that CV, which is the critical value, equals 9.488, and our S squared equals 9.645. So in this example, we're going to reject the null hypothesis, and we can see this in a normal distribution chart. 9.4, 9.6, and we can see that this falls within the significance level, so we're going to reject the null.
So I'm going to show you a different way of solving the chi-square, and in this case it's going to be with related samples, and we're going to find the relationship between our select and grades. So the first step is to find the sum of each individual column. So we're going to find the sum of more than 4 hours, and we're going to find the sum of less than 4 hours, and we're also going to find the sum of straight A's, and we're going to find the sum of not having straight A's. So we're just going to add them. So 150 plus 100 is going to be 250. And 60 plus 7 is going to be 130. So now we're going to go to more than 4 hours, and it's going to equal to 170. And less than 4 hours is going to equal to 210. So now that we have all the individual columns, we're going to add up the total sum, and this is going to equal to 380. So the next step is to find the numbers that pertain to each and every box. So for example, to find straight A's and more than 4 hours of sleep, to get 150, we're going to multiply 210 times 250, because it's on this column, divided by the total sum. For this case, we're going to multiply 210, because it's on more than 4 hours of sleep column, and multiply it by 130 because it's on the not straight A's column, and divided by 380 as well. And for this one, we're going to do 210 times 250 divided by total sum. And lastly, we're going to multiply 170 times 130 divided by total sum. .15, 71.84, and 111.84. And 58.15. So after we get all the numbers, we're gonna plug them into each box that it pertains to. So for example, 138.15 goes into straight A's and more than 4 hours of sleep. And this one goes into the third equation, which is 111.84 and 58.15. So after we have each number with its individual calculation that we solve for each one, we're going to, the original numbers are going to end up being O, and we're going to plug that in. So it's going to equal to 150, 60, 170. 150, 60, 170. And the expected is going to be the numbers that we calculated on that side, which is going to be 138.15, 71.84, 111.84, and 58.15. So now we're going to move on to the next column, which is O minus E. And this would equal to 11.85, 11.84. So after calculating O minus E, we're going to square O minus E, and this is going to equal to 140.42. The second one is going to be 140.18. The third one is going to be 140.18 as well. And keep in mind that these numbers end up being similar to one another. 0.42. So the next step after doing O minus E squared, you're going to divide O minus E squared, which is this calculation, divided by E. So just plug that in, and 140.42 divided by 138.15 is going to equal to 1.001, and 140.18 divided by 71.84, and so on. the calculations are gonna be 1.95, 1.25, and 2.4. Also, outcome minus expected squared is gonna always be close to 1. So that's how you know you're going on the right path if you're near 1. So after you find O minus E squared, you're gonna add all the variables, which is gonna equal to 6.62. And this is gonna be your chi-square. So the last step is to calculate the degrees of freedom. And in order to calculate the degrees of freedom, the equation is gonna be row minus 1 times column minus 1. So because we have 2 rows and 2 columns, we're gonna plug in the number 2 for row and plug in the number 2 for column. And 1 times 1 is gonna equal to 1. So the degrees of freedom is 1. And after having your degrees of freedom, we're gonna go to our table and find the critical value. So in this column, we could see the degrees of freedom. And since we have 1 degree of freedom, we're gonna go to our right and stop here at 0.05. And our critical value is gonna be 3.841. So after looking at our table, we figured out that the critical value was 3.841. So once we have the critical value, we compare it to the chi-square. And because the chi-square is more than the critical value, we reject null. And once we reject null, that means that something is happening. So in this case, that means that there's actually a relationship with grades and the number of hours that students sleep.
Do I do like the cookie snap? Okay.
So we solve chi-square. Chi-square? Chi-square, yeah, okay.